Single dad walks into his son's school. Cafeteria. The first thing he hears makes him stop. Mid-step. Part 1. The laugh that didn't belong. That's not his son's laugh. The words weren't spoken aloud. They exploded inside Ethan Carter's mind the instant he stepped into the crowded cafeteria at Lincoln Elementary. His hand froze on the cafeteria door. Forks clinked against trays. Children shouted across tables. Teachers smiled while trying to keep hundreds of kids under control. But Ethan heard only one thing. A little boy laughing. A laugh so familiar, yet impossible. Because it wasn't coming from his 8-year-old son, Noah. It was coming from another child. A child Ethan had never seen before. For one terrifying moment, his heart forgot how to beat. The laugh sounded exactly like Emily, his late wife. Emily had been gone for 5 years. A drunk driver had taken her away on a rainy October night, leaving Ethan to raise their newborn son alone. Since that day, Ethan had built his entire world around Noah. Every morning he packed lunches. Every evening he checked homework. Every birthday, every scraped knee, every nightmare. He handled them alone. Friends told him to remarry. His parents begged him to move closer. But Ethan always answered the same way. Noah already lost one parent. He won't lose another because I'm chasing a new life. Life wasn't easy. Money was tight. Ethan worked as a commercial electrician, often leaving home before sunrise. Still, every afternoon, no matter how exhausted he was, he picked Noah up from school himself. That routine never changed. Until today, the school had invited parents to a family lunch day. Parents could surprise their children by eating lunch together. Noah had been counting down for weeks. "Dad, promise you'll come." I wouldn't miss it for anything. So Ethan took the afternoon off. He even wore the blue button-down shirt Noah always said made him look like a superhero. Walking into the cafeteria, Ethan expected one thing: his son's huge smile. Instead, he heard that laugh. The impossible laugh. He slowly turned toward the sound. At the far corner of the cafeteria sat a second-grade class. One little boy was laughing so hard that milk nearly came out of his nose. Golden brown hair. Bright green eyes. The exact crooked smile Emily used to have. Ethan felt the room begin to spin. "No," he whispered. "It can't be." The boy looked up. For one split second, their eyes met. The child suddenly stopped laughing. His smile disappeared. Instead, he stared at Ethan with the exact same confused expression Ethan was wearing. Neither of them moved. It felt like looking into a memory that had somehow become real. Just then, "Dad!" Noah came running across the cafeteria and wrapped both arms around Ethan's waist. "You came." Ethan forced himself to smile. "Of course I did, buddy." But his eyes never left the mysterious little boy across the room. The boy was still staring, as if he recognized Ethan too. And somehow, that frightened Ethan more than anything. Ethan tried to focus on Noah. He smiled, opened the lunchbox he'd packed that morning, and asked about math class, recess, and the upcoming baseball game. Noah chatted excitedly between bites of grilled cheese, completely unaware that his father was barely hearing a word. Every few seconds, Ethan's eyes drifted back to the little boy across the cafeteria. The child was no longer laughing. He kept glancing toward Ethan, as though he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Finally, a teacher approached the boy and whispered, "Tyler, your grandmother is here." The name meant nothing to Ethan. But when the elderly woman stood, Ethan felt another jolt. She looked strangely familiar. Not because he'd met her, but because she'd appeared in dozens of old family photographs Emily had once shown him. His breath caught. Could it really be Emily's Aunt Margaret? Emily had often spoken about Aunt Margaret, who lived in another state. They hadn't seen each other in years before Emily passed away. The woman took Tyler's hand and began walking toward the cafeteria exit. As they passed Ethan's table, Tyler suddenly stopped. He looked directly at Ethan. Then at Noah. "You two have the same eyes," the little boy said softly. The cafeteria seemed to fall silent. Margaret's face drained of color. "Tyler," she said quickly, gently tugging his arm. "Come on, sweetheart." But Tyler didn't move. Instead, he looked at Ethan again. My grandma says my mom had eyes like yours. Ethan slowly stood. Excuse me, he said, his voice trembling. Have we met before? Margaret stared at him for several long seconds. Then she whispered a name. Ethan? He nodded. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh, my goodness. Noah looked between them, confused. Dad, who is she? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I never thought I'd see you again. Before Ethan could ask another question, the school principal walked over. Mrs. Dawson, is everything all right? Margaret quickly composed herself. Yes, everything's fine. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded envelope. I've carried this for 5 years, she said quietly, handing it to Ethan. It was supposed to be given to you, but I never knew where to find you. Ethan looked down at the envelope. Across the front, written in familiar handwriting, were 4 words that made his knees weak. For Ethan. When you're ready. It was Emily's handwriting. The handwriting he'd thought he'd never see again. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold the letter. He looked up, but Margaret and Tyler were already walking away. Just before disappearing through the cafeteria doors, Tyler turned back one last time and gave Ethan the exact same warm smile Emily used whenever she wanted to tell him that everything would be okay. Ethan stood frozen, clutching the unopened letter against his chest. Somehow he knew his life, and Noah's, was about to change forever. Ethan didn't open the envelope in the cafeteria. He couldn't. His hands were trembling too much. He smiled through lunch for Noah's sake, pretending everything was normal. But inside, his mind was racing. Who was Tyler? Why had Emily written this letter? And why had it taken 5 years to reach him? That evening, after Noah had fallen asleep with his favorite baseball tucked under one arm, Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was silent. The same silence that had followed Emily's death all those years ago. He carefully broke the faded seal. Inside was a single handwritten letter. Emily's elegant handwriting filled both sides of the page. My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, it means life surprised us again. Ethan swallowed hard. Tears blurred the words. First, I need you to know something. I never stopped loving you, not for 1 second. If fate separated us sooner than we expected, promise me you won't spend your whole life carrying guilt. Love Noah enough for both of us. Laugh again. Live again. A tear landed on the page. Emily's words felt as if she were sitting across from him. Then the letter changed. There's someone else you may one day meet. Ethan's heart pounded. His name is Tyler. He froze. Before we met, my cousin Rachel became pregnant. She was young, frightened, and planned to place the baby for adoption. A few months before Noah was born, she asked me to promise that if anything ever happened to her, I'd help her son know where he came from. Ethan's eyes widened. Rachel passed away from a sudden illness shortly after Tyler was born. My Aunt Margaret raised him, but she was always afraid of disrupting our lives. I kept photos of him because I wanted Noah to know he had family close to his age. If the time ever feels right, I hope the boys can know each other. Family doesn't have to share the same last name to share the same heart. Ethan leaned back in his chair. Tyler wasn't Emily's son. He wasn't Ethan's son. He was Emily's young cousin, a child she'd promised never to forget. A promise death had prevented her from keeping. At the bottom of the letter, Emily had written one final sentence. Please don't let Tyler grow up believing he's alone. Ethan covered his face and cried. Not because of another secret, but because even in her final days, Emily had been thinking about someone else's future. The next morning, Ethan made a decision. He called Lincoln Elementary. Hi, he said. I'm trying to reach the grandmother of a student named Tyler Dawson. The school secretary hesitated. I'm sorry, sir. We can't give out family information. I understand, Ethan replied gently. Could you please give Mrs. Dawson my phone number? Tell her. It's about Emily. There was a long pause. I'll pass along the message. Less than an hour later, Ethan's phone rang. Hello? A trembling voice answered. This is Margaret. There was another pause before she whispered, I've been praying for this phone call for 5 years. Margaret invited Ethan to her small home on the edge of town that Saturday afternoon. Noah came along, clutching his baseball glove, unaware that this visit would change both their lives. As Ethan pulled into the driveway, he noticed an old swing hanging from a giant oak tree. A little boy was pumping his legs, trying to swing higher. Tyler. The moment he spotted Noah, he jumped off the swing. "You came!" Tyler shouted, his face lighting up. Noah smiled politely, though he looked confused. "Hi." Within minutes, the two boys were tossing a baseball across the yard as if they'd known each other for years. Ethan watched in amazement. Children had a way of ignoring the walls adults built. Inside the house, Margaret placed a photo album on the coffee table. "I think it's time you saw these." She opened the first page. There was Emily, barely 20 years old, sitting in a hospital chair. In her arms was a newborn baby. Tyler. Emily's smile was radiant. "I remember that day," Margaret whispered. Rachel was so sick after giving birth. Emily stayed at the hospital for 3 straight days, helping with the baby. She turned another page. There were pictures of Emily visiting Tyler every birthday, reading him books, holding his tiny hand, helping him blow out candles. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "I never knew." Margaret nodded sadly. "Emily didn't want you to feel responsible for another family. She always said one day, when the time is right, Ethan will meet Tyler. He has the biggest heart of anyone I know." Ethan lowered his head. "I wish she'd trusted me enough to tell me." "She did trust you," Margaret replied gently. "She was simply trying to protect you." Noah had just been born, and life was already overwhelming. A sudden burst of laughter drifted in through the open window. The two men looked outside. Noah had just struck out Tyler with a slow curveball. Instead of getting upset, Tyler laughed so hard he nearly fell over. Noah laughed too. For the first time in years, Ethan heard a sound that didn't bring him pain. It brought him peace. Later that afternoon, the boys sat on the porch eating homemade chocolate chip cookies. "So," Noah asked, "does this mean we're cousins?" Tyler shrugged. "I guess." Noah grinned. "Cool. I've never had a cousin before." Tyler smiled back. "I've never had one either." Margaret quietly wiped away a tear. As the sun began to set, Ethan prepared to leave. Before they reached the car, Tyler ran up to him. "Mr. Carter?" Ethan knelt. "Yeah, buddy." Tyler nervously held out a folded piece of paper. "I drew this." It was a crayon picture. 2 boys playing baseball. An older man standing beside them. Above the drawing, in uneven handwriting, Tyler had written, "Family finds each other." Ethan couldn't speak. He simply wrapped Tyler in a hug. At that moment, he realized Emily's final wish had never been about solving a mystery. It had been about healing 2 lonely hearts before they grew up, believing they had to face the world alone. As Ethan drove home that evening, Noah looked out the window and quietly asked, "Dad, can Tyler come to my birthday next month?" Ethan smiled through tears. "I was hoping you'd ask." But neither of them knew that just 3 days later, a phone call from Tyler's doctor would reveal a heartbreaking truth, one that would test just how far family is willing to go for love. 3 days after meeting Tyler, Ethan's phone rang just as he was finishing work. The caller ID read, "Margaret Dawson." Her voice was shaking before she even said hello. "Ethan." "It's Tyler." His heart dropped. "What happened?" "We were at his checkup today. The doctors found something they missed before." Silence. "They think he has a serious bone marrow disorder." Ethan leaned against his work truck. "What does that mean?" "It means—" Margaret struggled to speak. Without a bone marrow transplant, he may not survive." The words hit Ethan like a freight train. "When do they know for sure?" "More tests tomorrow." That evening, Ethan sat on Noah's bed after dinner. Noah noticed immediately that something was wrong. "Dad, are you crying?" Ethan forced a smile. "Do you remember Tyler?" "Of course. He's my cousin." Ethan nodded. "He's very sick." Noah's smile faded. "Can the doctors make him better?" "They're going to try." Noah was quiet for a long moment. Then he asked a question only a child could ask. "Is he scared?" Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "I think he probably is." Noah climbed off the bed and disappeared into his room. A minute later, he returned carrying his most treasured possession, his signed baseball. It had been autographed by a retired Major League player during a charity event. Noah kept it in a glass case and never let anyone touch it. He placed it in Ethan's hands. "Can Tyler have it?" Ethan blinked. "But you love this baseball." "I do." "Then why give it away?" Noah looked down at his socks. "Because if I was in the hospital, I'd want someone to make me smile." Ethan pulled his son into the tightest hug he'd ever given him. At that moment, he realized Emily was still shaping Noah's heart through the love she had left behind. The next afternoon, Ethan and Noah visited Tyler at the children's hospital. Tyler looked much smaller than he had just days earlier. An IV was taped to his tiny arm. Machines beeped softly beside his bed. But when Noah walked in holding the baseball, Tyler's eyes lit up. "For me?" Noah nodded. "You can keep it until you're better." Tyler carefully held the ball as though it were made of glass. "No one's ever given me something this special." "You can give it back after we play baseball together?" Noah said with a grin. Tyler smiled. "It's a deal." Margaret quietly turned away, wiping tears from her cheeks. Later that evening, the lead physician met Ethan and Margaret in a consultation room. "The diagnosis is confirmed," she said gently. "Tyler has a rare bone marrow failure syndrome." Margaret asked the question she feared most. "Can you save him?" The doctor nodded slowly. "Yes, if we can find a compatible bone marrow donor." She explained that close relatives often had the best chance of being a match. Margaret had already been tested. She wasn't compatible. The National Donor Registry had no ideal match yet. The doctor looked at Ethan. "Since Noah and Tyler are extended relatives through Emily's family, there's a small possibility Noah could be a partial match. It's not likely, but it's worth testing if you're comfortable with it." Ethan looked at his sleeping son through the hospital room window. Without hesitation, he answered, "Do whatever you need to do." The doctor smiled gently. "We'll arrange the test first thing tomorrow." As they left the hospital, Tyler pressed his face against the window and waved the signed baseball. Ethan waved back, praying with everything he had that the next call from the hospital would bring hope instead of heartbreak. The next morning, Noah squeezed Ethan's hand as they walked into Children's Mercy Hospital. "Dad," he whispered, "will the test hurt?" "Just a quick blood draw, buddy." Noah nodded bravely. "If it helps Tyler, I'm okay." The nurse smiled warmly. "I wish every grown-up had your courage." Within minutes, the sample was taken. Now all they could do was wait. The waiting felt endless. 3 days passed. Ethan could barely focus at work. Margaret hardly left Tyler's hospital room. Every time Ethan's phone buzzed, his heart skipped a beat. Finally, on Friday afternoon, the hospital called. "Ethan, could you come in as soon as possible?" His stomach tightened. "Is Tyler okay?" "He's stable. We just need to discuss the test results." Ethan rushed to the hospital with Noah. Margaret was already there, nervously twisting a tissue in her hands. The doctor entered carrying a folder. She smiled. For the first time in days. "I have some good news." Everyone leaned forward. Against the odds, Noah is a strong donor match. Margaret burst into tears. "Oh, thank God." Tyler looked confused. "Does that mean I get to go home?" The doctor knelt beside his bed. "It means your cousin has a chance to help make you well." Tyler looked at Noah with wide eyes. "You'd do that for me?" Before Ethan could answer, Noah spoke first. "Your family." Those two simple words left every adult in the room wiping away tears. Over the next week, doctors carefully explained the donation process to Ethan. They assured him the procedure was considered safe and that Noah would be under expert care the entire time. Ethan still worried. He wasn't afraid for himself. He was afraid of asking his 8-year-old son to carry such a big responsibility. That night after dinner, Ethan sat beside Noah on the porch. "You know," he said softly, "if you don't want to do this, no one will be angry." Noah looked surprised. "But Tyler needs me." "He does." "What if it were me?" Ethan felt his throat tighten. "I'd pray someone would help you." Noah smiled. "Then I already know my answer." He reached for Ethan's hand. "Mom always said helping people is what makes a family." Ethan stared at him. He had never taught Noah those exact words. Emily had. Years ago, It was as if a piece of her was still guiding them both. The day of the procedure arrived. Tyler lay in one hospital room. Noah rested in another. Before they were taken away, the boys exchanged fist bumps. "No baseball until you're better," Noah joked. Tyler grinned. "Deal." Hours later, Ethan sat beside Margaret in the waiting room. Neither of them spoke much. Sometimes hope was too big for words. Finally, the transplant specialist walked toward them. Her smile said everything before she opened her mouth. The procedure went beautifully. Margaret covered her face and sobbed with relief. Ethan closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." The doctor added one important reminder. "This is only the beginning. Tyler's body still has to accept the transplant. The next few weeks will be critical." That night, Noah woke up feeling tired but smiled when Ethan entered his room. "Did it work?" Ethan kissed his forehead. "We won't know for a little while." Noah nodded. "Tell Tyler. I'm saving his spot on my baseball team." Across the hall, Tyler held the signed baseball close to his chest as he drifted off to sleep. For the first time since his diagnosis, he wasn't dreaming about hospitals. He was dreaming about playing catch with his cousin in the sunshine. Neither boy knew that, just days later, someone from Ethan's past would walk into the hospital carrying a secret that could change everything they thought they knew about Emily. 2 weeks passed. Every morning, Ethan drove Noah to the hospital before work. Together, they would peek into Tyler's room through the glass. Some days Tyler smiled. Some days he was too weak to lift his head. The doctors warned them not to celebrate too soon. Bone marrow transplants were unpredictable. The next few weeks would determine everything. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, Ethan received another call from Margaret. "Ethan, someone is here asking for you." "Who?" "He says." "His name is Daniel Brooks." The name stirred a distant memory. Daniel had been Emily's college professor, the man who had later become director of the community literacy center where she volunteered before Noah was born. Ethan hadn't seen him in nearly a decade. When Ethan arrived at the hospital, he found an older man sitting quietly in the family lounge, holding a weathered leather journal. Daniel stood as soon as he saw him. "I've been looking for you." Ethan shook his hand. "It's been a long time." Daniel nodded sadly. "Too long." He looked down at the journal. "Emily asked me to keep this until the day your family truly needed it." Ethan frowned. "Another letter?" "No," Daniel replied gently. "Her journal." That evening, after Noah had gone to sleep, Ethan opened the journal. It wasn't filled with dramatic secrets. It was filled with ordinary moments. Notes about Noah's first smile. Sketches of future family vacations. Recipes she wanted to try. Dreams she hoped would one day come true. Then Ethan found an entry written only weeks before Emily's accident. "If you're reading this, Ethan, it means I didn't get the lifetime I hoped for." His vision blurred. "Please don't let grief convince Noah that love always ends in loss. Teach him that love grows when it's shared. If he ever chooses kindness over comfort, you'll know I helped raise him too." Ethan couldn't hold back his tears. Noah had done exactly that. Without hesitation. Without expecting anything in return. Just like his mother. The following morning, Tyler's doctor rushed into the waiting room carrying a chart. She was smiling so broadly that Margaret stood before she even spoke. "His blood counts are climbing," Margaret gasped. Is that good?" The doctor laughed through happy tears. "It's wonderful. The transplant is working." Ethan wrapped Margaret in a hug as she cried against his shoulder. Across the hallway, Noah heard the news and ran to Tyler's room. "You did it!" he shouted. Tyler laughed. "No," he pointed at Noah. "We did it." The two boys bumped fists. Even the nurses wiped away tears. 3 weeks later, Tyler was finally strong enough to leave the hospital. Doctors and nurses lined the hallway, applauding as he walked toward the exit with the signed baseball tucked under one arm. Before climbing into Margaret's car, Tyler turned to Ethan. "Mr. Carter?" Ethan smiled. "You can call me Ethan." Tyler shook his head. "I was wondering—" He hesitated. "Would it be okay if I called you Uncle Ethan instead?" For a moment, Ethan couldn't speak. Then he knelt and hugged the little boy tightly. "I would be honored." Behind them, Noah grinned from ear to ear. I told you we're family. As they drove home that afternoon, Ethan glanced toward the bright autumn sky. For years, he had believed Emily's story had ended on the night of the accident. Now he understood the truth. Love had continued writing her story through every life she had touched. And because of one promise she made years ago, two lonely boys had found a family they never knew they were missing. But one final surprise still waited. On Noah's 9th birthday, something would happen that would leave every guest in tears and fulfill Emily's greatest dream in a way no one could have imagined. A month later, the Carter home buzzed with laughter. Blue and white balloons floated across the living room. A homemade banner stretched over the fireplace. Happy 9th birthday, Noah! For the first time since Emily's passing, the house no longer felt empty. It felt alive. Margaret arrived carrying her famous apple pie. Tyler followed close behind, looking healthier than anyone had dared to hope just weeks earlier. His cheeks had regained their color, and although he still tired easily, his smile was brighter than ever. The boys raced into the backyard with baseball gloves in hand. First 1 to 10 catches wins, Noah shouted. You're going down! Tyler laughed. Ethan stood on the porch watching them play. For a moment, he closed his eyes. He could almost hear Emily laughing beside him. After cake and presents, Noah climbed onto a chair and tapped his fork against a glass. I have something to say. The backyard grew quiet. Noah looked at Tyler. When I met you in the cafeteria, I thought I was just making a new friend. He smiled. But now I know I got something even better. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. I asked Dad if I could give you this. Tyler carefully opened it. Inside was a silver baseball keychain engraved with 4 simple words. Brothers by heart. Tyler's eyes instantly filled with tears. I'll keep it forever. No, Noah replied with a grin. You'll carry it forever. The 2 boys hugged as the adults quietly wiped away their tears. Just then, Daniel Brooks stepped forward. I have one last gift. He placed a small wooden box on the picnic table. I was saving this for the day your family felt whole again. Inside the box was a tiny video camera memory card. Daniel smiled. Emily recorded something a few weeks before Noah was born. Ethan's hands trembled. He had never known it existed. They hurried inside and connected the memory card to the television. The screen flickered. Then Emily appeared. She was sitting on the nursery floor, one hand resting gently on her pregnant belly. She smiled directly into the camera. Hi, my boys. Ethan covered his mouth. Noah stared at the screen in amazement. Emily laughed softly. If you're watching this, it means life didn't go exactly as we planned. She paused, her eyes shining with hope. Ethan, thank you for loving our son. Noah, if you're old enough to understand this, I want you to know something. You were never meant to make the world richer. You were meant to make it kinder. Then she looked straight into the camera again. And if there are other children standing beside you, I hope you welcome them with open arms. I've always believed that family isn't measured by blood. It's measured by the people who choose to stay. The room fell completely silent. Tyler quietly reached for Noah's hand. Noah squeezed it back. Emily's final words echoed through the speakers. Promise me you'll keep choosing love. The screen faded to black. No one spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Ethan looked at the 2 boys. I think your mom just gave us our mission. Over the next year, life slowly settled into a beautiful rhythm. Tyler's health continued to improve. Every Saturday, the cousins played baseball at the local park. Margaret became part of every family holiday. Thanksgiving, Christmas, 4th of July, no one celebrated separately anymore. One spring afternoon, Ethan filed the legal paperwork to become Tyler's permanent guardian if anything ever happened to Margaret. When he told Tyler, the little boy ran into his arms. I knew you'd never let me be alone. Never, Ethan whispered. Not while I'm breathing. Years later, at Noah's high school graduation, the valedictorian stepped to the microphone. It wasn't Noah. It was Tyler. He looked toward the front row, where Ethan, Margaret, and Noah sat together. My life was saved by medicine, Tyler said. But it was changed by love. When I was 8 years old, I thought I had lost almost everyone. Then one man walked into a school cafeteria. He had no idea that a single hello would give me a brother, a home, and a future. He smiled at Ethan. Some people become fathers because they're there at the beginning. Others become fathers because they choose to stay. The greatest man I've ever known chose to stay. The entire auditorium rose to its feet in a standing ovation. Ethan looked up toward the sky through the gymnasium windows. Quietly, he whispered, "We did it, Emily." And somehow, in the warmth of that moment, it felt as though she had never truly left. The end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, share this video with someone you love, and leave a comment telling us what part moved you the most. Your support helps us create more heartfelt stories that remind us all that family is built with love, kindness, and the courage to stay